Don't hear anything yet. Is the rest of the group able to hear me? Okay, Angie says yeah, that's good. All right, well, hopefully we get Diane on here in a second. But in the meantime, I wanted to welcome you to our September meeting. I can't believe it's already September, and well, certainly outside today feels like fall. Hopefully it warms up a little bit more. I don't think I'm ready for this weather quite yet, but drastically. You can see the agenda on the screen in front of you. We'll spend a couple minutes here doing the roll call, letting other folks on the call introduce themselves, and then we'll also approve the minutes from our last meeting if you had a chance to look at those. And then we will get into the Satellite Communications and Broadcasting Association with Steve Hill as Executive Director. Will be here to present to us. That's one of the topics that we had talked about. We wanted to hear. We've heard from several different technology providers in the broadband space. Satellite was the one area we hadn't tackled yet. So we'll get an overview of that. From there, we'll take a quick 5 to 10 minute break, depending on how much time we have left there. And then we'll get into the Minnesota mapping with Connected Nation. And that's one thing as a topic, again, a couple months ago when we first started, that we wanted to review how the mapping was done today. There's been several discussions on whether that's a topic we need to tackle or make any recommendations there. But I think it's good for us to understand the mapping in that space. And I'm hoping we have good engagement there, lots of questions being asked, and so we can get some good insights. And then the bulk of the rest of the time will be really dedicated to talking a little bit about the report writing. And we do have some writers assigned for the 3 subgroups and sort of how we want to bring that together. And we'll end with the subgroup updates to make sure, like, kind of see where your meetings have gone, where are you right now, and see if there's any additional discussions we need to have there. And then also would like to end that with any sort of future topics you also may want to have at the remaining couple meetings that we have. I think the bulk of our meetings from here on out will probably be dedicated to the recommendations we put together. I know the meeting in August is going to be, there's going to be with the Blended Foundation, has lots of presentations around that. We'll have an hour discussions there. And then I do believe our next meeting in November will certainly be dedicated to the recommendations we put together for this year. And then we'll end with any public comments or any other business that we need to tackle at that point in time. So that will be the bulk of our time together. Okay, so with that, Diane, are you able to, can you take roll call for us if you're able to speak? I think you're still on mute.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's weird. I have to my phone work. Oh, great. So Teddy, you're here. Nolan Calvin, Dale Cook, Steve Fensky.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Steve. Steve Georgie.
I'm here.
Jason Holliday, I think he said he would not be here today. Mark Johnson.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I saw you. Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. Okay.
Bernadine Josh. Thanks. Bernadine Johnson. Brian Cranbeer.
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Brian. Micah Myers.
I'm here. Good morning.
Thanks, Micah. Teresa Sunday.
I'm here.
Jim Wycombe. Okay, got us on. Paul Wirt.
Good morning.
Morning, Paul. Dave Wolf. Saw Dave, don't hear Dave. I'll start at the top and come back down. Nolan Calvin. Dale Cook. Bernadine Joslin.
I'm here.
Thank you, Bernadine. Jim Wycombe. Dave Wolf.
Can you hear me, Diane?
I can hear you now, Dave. Thank you. All right, so thought I saw Jim for sure, but I don't have him, Dale, or Nolan. And Jason we knew was going to miss.
Yeah. Dale looks like he's on as well, but it doesn't look like video or audio is turned on. Jim also same thing, I think. Video's on, but not the voice for some reason. Okay. If you want, you can also chat and send notes in the chat, and we can make sure that Diane notes you down from that standpoint. Okay, and then, okay, so those are the task force members. Are there others that are on the call who would like to announce themselves at this point in time? We'll move on to the meeting minutes.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Hello.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muting and unmuting and trying to get my image in there. My name is Kurt Crowshoe, and I'm with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I'm their American Indian liaison, and I just stepped in to just keep abreast of the American Indian representatives' work, but it appears that Jason isn't in today. So will there not, I guess the question that I could put out is, will there not be a report out there?
Typically, Kurt, good morning, first of all.
Morning.
Typically, we haven't had a reporting yet, and Jason was just on in the last meeting, so
Very good.
some of the reporting will most likely happen through the recommendations that will come forth in future meetings.
Okay, and then I can just follow up with Angie and or Diane, which I probably should have done this morning. But thank you. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
This is Anna from the Cable Association. Good morning.
Good morning, Anna. Okay. As far as the meeting minutes from the last meeting, I think Diana sent those out. Any questions, comments, or anything else the team, the task force members would want to comment on that? Hearing none, we just will approve the meetings unless we have any dissent. Minutes are approved. Okay. So we can go ahead and get started with our meeting today. I'm not sure if Steve Hill is on the call or not, yet or not with the Satellite Communications and Broadcasting Association. But a little bit early. Steve Hill, are you on? Okay. Diane, you know, they're just going to.
Well, there's a Steve on. It just says Steve. I don't know if that's Steve Hill. And Judy Cook is on. Maybe Judy can let us know.
Good morning. I thought that the Steve that was showing up there was Steve Hill, so maybe that Steve can tell us if it's Steve. Yes, Steve Hill is on.
He's talking, but we can't hear him. He needs to, I am using my phone as well, but he needs to unmute the microphone on his screen.
Did you hear that?
In the meantime, we could actually go to one of the agenda items while Steve's getting connected. So the one I'll skip to is the report writing process and the assignment of writers. One of the things we had talked about last time was potentially, and I opened up the question on, who would be, if you could volunteer someone or help us, or someone from the team help write with the report writing and starting with the 3 subgroups. So glad to say that we have 3 folks now that are probably assigned to this. So for the 3 working groups or the subgroups for the Minnesota model, Steve Pensky has volunteered to help put together the pieces into those recommendations and bring those forward to the task force. So he'll be working with that subgroup. So Steve, thank you very much for volunteering there. I really do appreciate that. For the barriers and technology subgroup, Cassie Lavelle, who works with me, and Cassie, I believe, is on right now. She will be working with the second group to be able to pull together the information and then the recommendations that may come forward from that working group. And then for the digital inclusion piece on the third subgroup, Ann Tracy from the Blandon Foundation, and I'm appreciative that she's making her time available for that as well, will be the third writer. So what we'll do is these 3 writers will work in conjunction with one another and pull up the different pieces together for the various recommendations in the 3 sections. And then what we'll do is obviously put that together and bring those recommendations forward to this overall task force. We can have a discussion, and then there's probably going to be some sort of a summary recommendation that comes in together for the overall report that'll be done at the end of the year. From a structure of the report itself, I'll bring that forward, probably be communicating through email. But at an initial level, what I was thinking is kind of there's going to be some sort of an executive summary that's going to be at the beginning of the document, followed by all the recommendations that will come out of our joint work here. So we'll see there'll probably be a number of recommendations, and then we'll debate, how many we want to bring forward or not. So there'll be just initial recommendations, and then they'll be easier to consume. And then there'll be the body of the work that's probably going to be broken up into the 3 subgroups. So there'll be 3 big sections, and then each subgroup can have some introduction about their area, the information they looked into, and the information that was used to gather, and then the recommendation itself that are applicable to that subgroup into that section. So that's how the document will kind of lay out, and then we'll most likely have some sort of a conclusion section that just kind of summarizes everything. I will like to have everybody's signature at some point. Now, I don't know how we do this since we're not in person, but we'll probably try to get some sort of a digital signature, and if possible, and hopefully in one of these meetings, if we could get together, it would be also great to do a picture with all of us. If the picture's not available for kind of as a group, what we could do is probably send in individual pictures from the task force members and have that at the end of the document. And then obviously, any kind of supporting information, backup information most likely will be in the appendix section of our so graphs, charts, literature from other areas that we pulled into could be included in that. So that will be the main sort of setup for the document that gets put together, and then obviously we will have a draft available, we'll get a chance to review it, and then we'll probably spend one of our meetings just kind of going through the document once it starts coming together, to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what's in there, and hopefully we'll be able to submit that at the end of the year. So that's the tentative initial plan. So obviously it'll be key to help work with the writers in your groups, have some good collaboration there so we can go forward. So there's a question here. As a recommendation that comes from each subgroup, there be 3 writers to also help with the rest of the 4 content. Yes. So the question is, will the other writers help? Yes. So what we'll do is once the 3 writers, each writer will get together with each subgroup to figure out what that looks like, and then I'll get together with the 3 writers to be able to figure out how we sort of lay out the rest of the document as well, and the content that's relevant for those areas. Does that answer your question, Bernadine?
This is Steve Hill. Can you folks hear me now?
Yes, Steve, we can hear you.
Hey, all right. I don't know what the issue was. I had dialed in. I could hear everybody talking to me. I'm sort of waving to everybody, and nothing was going on. So, you got to love getting on technology calls when the technology doesn't work. So
it always works that way. So we can see you and hear you now.
Exactly.
Have a bonus. Are you going to be sharing a document?
I would love to share a screen with you and go through my standard presentation.
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and get set up on that one while we finish this other topic. Bernadine, did I answer your question, or was there more you wanted to comment there?
Yep.
Going back on mute.
Yes, you answered my question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any questions, comments from anybody else? Hear any, but please reach out to me if you'd like more details on that one as far as the coordination is concerned. We have about 2 to 3 month time frame here, so a little bit of work ahead of us, but I'm pretty sure as we bring it all together, it will come out. So with that, Steve, are you able to share yet your screen?
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. I see you, but not the screen yet.
Said I'm the presenter and said I'm sharing the screens. There we go. Let's see. See it now?
Okay. Yes.
There we go. Okay, sorry. All right. So just some background. My name is Steve Hill. I'm the Executive Director and President of the Satellite Broadcast Communications Association, and I've been in the industry now for 25 plus years, and for the last few years I've actually been traveling around the country talking to different policyholders and stakeholders about satellite broadband and sort of what's going on with the industry, and I appreciate the opportunity today to talk to you folks about it. I know I've talked to a few of you in the past, but that was in a lot of cases over a year ago, and a lot has changed since then. So I will go through the presentation. Feel free to ask any questions. But suffice to say, it's a fairly exciting time within our industry. There's a lot changing on the technology side and on the sort of the application side. And so, without further ado, I'll dive right in. So, satellite broadband's been around since early 2000s. When it first came out, it was by Hughes had a product. It was really a first generation product. It was fairly slow speeds, and there was very limited data caps. So people would, they would quickly run up against the caps if they're trying to do any sort of high bandwidth applications, or it really wouldn't have been something back then for streaming and those type of things. There was also a lot of limited capacity. We fairly hit capacity fairly quickly, so it was difficult for it to add a lot of customers starting about 2014 through about 2017. That said, we've got over 1 million customers on a Generation 1 product. So for people that didn't have options, I'll use an example. My father lives in a very rural state on a lake. There is no cable. There's nothing else out there. His connections are satellite TV and satellite internet. And for things such as email, plays online chess, those type of things, it was the product and it worked fine. There are two providers, both Hughes and Viasat have been in the market now for a number of years, and they've committed to really expanding that market, and they look at satellite internet as a growth potential for the next decade or more. Really, the game started to change in 2017. Both Hughes and Viasat launched new geosynchronous satellites. So when I say a geosynchronous satellite, that's a satellite that's located over the equator and gives you a fixed satellite location. So it rotates at the same speed of the Earth, and therefore is able to give us full coverage of the United States. So both those satellites were given full coverage of the United States, and between the two companies, we were able to deliver a 25 free speed everywhere within the country. In some markets, we're able to deliver 100 meg speed. I checked a little bit earlier today, and I know up in the Iron Range, it appears Viasat actually has a 30 meg speed is their standard package in that market. They've moved things around. There's really ability now for people to get unlimited plans. So, if they need, doing a lot of streaming or business applications, we do that. There's also what's called no hard data limits. So in the past with our first generation product, if somebody had an issue where they ran into, exceeded their amount, they would either have their service, essentially have their service shut off. That's no longer the case. Their service now, if they've exceeded their cap, may be slowed down during peak periods, but they're not going to be shut off and not be able to have service. The other thing is our industry is really focused on the rural and underserved markets. We recognize that there's probably 15 to 18% of the country that doesn't have an internet service. So there's really two fundamental challenges that we have as broadband providers, and frankly, you probably have the same. There's both an accessibility and an affordability. We are looking to address the accessibility aspect of this, and we're working very hard at doing that. And currently today, we have over 2.1 million customers. So as an industry, we have doubled in just a matter of a couple of years, and frankly, in the last 4 or 5 months, we've seen an even more large increase. So what are some of the applications being used today? With our service, we're seeing used for streaming. There's residential applications. There's business applications. Now, when I say business applications, we're seeing anything from warehouses using it for inventory. I've seen liquor stores using it to manage their credit card processing. Farmers using to check for weather. There's all sorts of different applications that are being used out there. And more are seeing it done. I had a customer call me up right when the pandemic started, and she works for a call center and manages a call center. She goes, I need connectivity, and how do I do this? And we were able to get her set up. And essentially, she's running her call center via satellite using the voice over IP and Zoom. One of our lobbyists in Alabama is at his house in the lake, is using it to work with his state legislators and does everything over Zoom. Prior to all this, if anybody had taken an airplane and gotten internet, you would have probably been using a Viasat system to connect on the internet. So American Airlines, United, were both using the Viasat system to connect on the internet. We're seeing a lot more applications in agriculture as people get into using things such as some of the smart farming applications, soil management, these type of things. There's just more and more stuff coming out there. One of the other growth areas that we've seen that I think we want to, and I was very surprised at this about a year ago, I found out that a lot of businesses are using satellite to ensure kind of continuity. And so the advantage of that is that, let's say they've got a wired connection and something happens, either it's weather related, somebody cuts a cable, whatever. Businesses are so needed to be connected today that they're using satellite as their backup connection. And so I was very surprised to see at the Hughes meeting that was one of their larger growth opportunities, was on the continuity side. So what's happened with the pandemic? First of all, the volume increased exponentially in a matter of days. And in the middle of March, I called my counterpart at Hughes, who handles all the installations. I'm like, all right, what's your typical installation time during all this craziness? And they go 3 to 5 days. I'm like, what was it before that? He goes, 3 to 5 days. They were able to keep those installations moving and the process moving at a time because they have the capacity for an installation force. One interesting thing we did see, and I think this, if you talk to other internet providers, they also saw the traffic shift of how our internet was being used. We saw it going from a primarily evening application to a day application. More people were using it for either e-learning or business applications. We saw a huge paradigm shift. We were able to also manage that network so that we didn't have capacity issues. And one of the big things as we rolled into the pandemic, all providers were very concerned about what's going to happen if everybody's online at the same time. Is this going to create such a bottleneck that it slowed things down? Much as in Europe, they asked providers asked Netflix to lower the quality of the video because they were afraid that things were going to be a problem, and it really did not turn out that way. We did sign on as an industry to the no disconnects for no pay during the pandemic. So customers that might have been having economic hardship were not going to be lost service during this period. We also increased as an industry what's called as bonus time. Now, the bonus time is a time typically between 2 and 8 a.m. where people can download video, download high volume applications, and it doesn't go impact their data plan. So what we want to do is people that, let's say, want to download Game of Thrones, do that during the bonus time so it won't impact your usage, and therefore you can watch it at any time. So we're really trying to educate the consumer of how to best manage the system so that they can use their data package and not have to upgrade to the most expensive package and say, no, you can still get away with using a $65, $70 package and still be able to do it. Remember, this is how you do that. And that was one of the things that we really spent some time trying to educate the consumer on how to best use the system and how to best take advantage of the capacity that they have available to them. The consumers, I'm not going to read these, but we found we're getting a lot of good case studies and consumers talking to us about different things and how they're using that system, whether it's a church to connect people with their food bank or a B&B. I mean, you know, internet today is essential. And so a B&B could be in the middle of nowhere, but people still, hey, I need to check my internet. I need to connect. And so these are very critical items to people, and we found that we're just getting a lot more of that. As I said, during the pandemic, we had so many people moving to work from home, those type of things. It became a dramatic shift. And also from the e-learning aspect, you know, people needing to have their kids be able to be connected and be able to get into the school and be able to learn and continue their lesson plans. We've also been very aggressive in supporting disaster recovery. The advantage with satellite with disaster recovery, it's easy to set up, it's easy to remove. It's a high-speed connection. You know, we offer both short and long-term relief. The fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, Puerto Rico, we provided service for many of the government buildings in Puerto Rico, and we provided connectivity to the convention center so that people could log into their Facebook account and update people back home, because otherwise there was no internet access. Mexico Beach with the hurricane. Currently, the forest fires that are going in California. Fires are probably the worst ones that you run into because that takes the longest to rebuild. So a couple years ago, the Sonoma County Fairgrounds was turned into a relief center, and we provided satellite internet there and a Wi-Fi system to the residents, so they had some form of connectivity. Today, we donate over 250,000 hours as an industry, and we continue to do so. We continue to be very aggressive on that. We work very closely with a number of other agencies, and so when these disasters happen, we can get in there and really provide that relief and that connectivity to both the responders and maybe people that have been impacted in the community. The important thing is, where is the industry going? And I'm pleased to say that both Hughes and Viasat have 2 new satellites launching. They each have a new satellite launching next year. The service will probably be deployed around this time, maybe closer to Q4 with the Hughes system. Viasat probably be a little bit earlier, but both of those satellites will be able to offer 8 to 10 times more capacity than is currently available. And so that's going to mean that we can offer much higher bandwidth, and we can offer many more customers. And so we can really expand that to grow that customer base dramatically. We're expecting to see 100 megabit plus service everywhere. There could be gigabit plans available to business partners. This is a 100% private investment. And it's also a proven technology. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one satellite on one household. So we can do things such as set up a satellite system and then a Wi-Fi. And so we've seen portable Wi-Fi systems being able to set up for schools. We've seen, there's been talk, I know somebody was here from one of the Native American associations. We've been talking to some of them in Arizona about setting up sort of a, a mesh Wi-Fi type network utilizing satellite to do that. So there's a lot of different applications that are available today, and there's just going to be more applications that we're going to be able to see and serve as we grow that business, and as we continue to see that improve going forward. And these 2 satellites are not the end. In fact, as soon as they go, there are expected to be other satellites in development. Actually, Viasat has 3 satellites that they're currently working on, and that will be launched within consecutive years. The next Hughes satellite will probably be sometime in 2024. That is expected again, 8 to 10 times the capacity. So you're going to just continue to see this quantum increase in availability, capacity, speeds, and performance. As I said, it's also 100% private investment. We're seeing in this industry a lot of people interested. There's a lot of money, and it's looked at how there can be a growth potential throughout the country and, frankly, throughout the world. There's also another type of satellite being discussed. I'm sure we've all heard about it. It's a lower satellite. You've probably all heard of SpaceX. SpaceX and Amazon and OneWeb are all using what's called a low Earth satellite. So as I mentioned before, current satellite technology is a fixed satellite located about 22,000 miles above the Earth, and it just sits there and orbits along with the Earth. The lower satellites are going to go at about 200 miles above the Earth, and those satellites are going to just constantly be circling the Earth, much like the space station. They go about 17,000 miles an hour, and they go all over the place. And the way a lower satellite system will work is because someone will have an antenna mounted on their house, and that antenna will pick up the closest satellite to them, and then that satellite, when it goes out of range, the next satellite coming within range will be picked up. So the technology will have to be, we're going to have to be able to quickly move from one satellite to next, because as I said, moving 17,000 miles an hour, they're only going to be visible by each antenna for a very short amount of time. That's why to get a full coverage in the United States, we're going to need approximately 12 to 16,000 satellites to be able to get that full coverage. SpaceX is currently in beta. Right now, I believe it's an employee beta. They are looking to expand that beta to the consumer market. And once they do, they'll be able to start giving out more performance statistics. Some of the advantages of low Earth satellite, and one of probably the biggest ones, is the latency. So latency is the time it takes to get from the Earth, to the satellite. Because they're lower Earth, that's going to be a lot less. And so they haven't come out with exactly what that is, but those applications will probably be a much lower latency. And one of the advantages with lower latency are things such as stock trading or gaming, these type of things. Will be able to give a better option than you can currently get with a geostationary satellite, because it's located at a much higher altitude. As more satellites improve, and as they use a laser technology to do this handoff, you're going to see speeds improving. But it's going to be an expensive rollout. SpaceX said it's going to be about $16 billion for them to fully deploy this service, and they're committed to do that. Amazon is also committed, as is OneWeb, and they've gotten the federals to do that. So within the decade, you're going to see upwards of 30,000 more satellites circling the Earth to provide this service, and you're going to see a quantum shift of how the industry does. And we believe that there's going to be a blend of both geostationary and lower satellites, because there's going to be plus minuses. So where does the future go with satellite broadband? There's going to be more applications with telemedicine. And we are doing some now, but you're going to see a lot more. Smart agriculture. We're going to be able to connect with soil management, or some of the combines, and putting up a mesh network at a farm using a satellite system, and be able to use that combine to connect, and so that they can do better crop management. Internet of Things. We are seeing a lot of people talking about Internet of Things, whether it's a smart cities program, self-driving cars. All of those things need connectivity. Satellites can be able to do that. Dish Network's talked about using satellite to offer offer a backbone for their 5G when they're going to be deploying to rural markets where they may not have an option to get a fiber feed. We're going to see continued private investment. That technology, it never will slow down. It will continuously improve, and it will continuously grow. The satellites that launch next year, they've already started the drawings, and the investment for the next generation and the next generation. So I remember talking to somebody back in, I think it was about 2013, about low Earth satellites, and they said, yeah, just wait until the next decade and you're going to see this product come out. So it's going to be a very interesting time. It's going to be a very exciting time for the industry. And as I said, we look at a way that we can be part of the overall solution to be able to solve the broadband needs of the unserved customers that are out there, and they just continue to be challenged, and especially as we're in a much more connected communities and much more connected world. So some of the things we like to say states consider is technology neutral policy. You know, don't put the thumb on the scale for one technology or another. Everybody's got pros and cons, and really being a part of the solution, and we want to be part of this. Consider time to deploy. As I said, in a lot of cases, we can deploy our products in a matter of days. We also talk to states about funding on a per subscriber basis, and we've done that in a couple states where the state is helping underwrite the cost of the upfront cost of the equipment, and that in turn lowers the cost to consumer. Our equipment, our infrastructure is already launched. By the time we've launched the satellite, that's our major part of the infrastructure. That is probably about $500 million. In general, a satellite costs about $8,000 per kilogram to deploy, and our satellites weigh 40,000 kilograms. So there's a lot of money there, and the actual equipment that we mount on a customer's house can cost up to $800 to $1,000. So as we talk to states, if they're looking at funding models, having to offset the cost of that upfront cost of the equipment would then in turn lowers that overall consumer cost. And the advantage of the state by doing something like that is they're only paying for the consumers that want the product. It's not, well, we have to, we're going to run this wired service out there, and X number of people will take it, but it's available. In this type of policy, so that enables customers to say, the state would only be funding for actual consumer taking the product. So we want to work with the state to be that solution. We know we are a little bit different in how our business model works. It's just the way it is. But that said, I think as people get creative, as states look at how to best deploy, how to deploy fastest, satellite is one of the options that should absolutely be considered. I am going to end my presentation and thank you and ask for any questions. I usually get about 15 to 20 minutes, so I try to keep within that. I know you gave me an hour, but I also know people need to be cognizant of time. I wasn't going to drone on and on. So with that said, I would like to open that up to questions and welcome anybody's feedback.
Mr. Chair, I have a question or two.
Please go ahead.
Steve, thanks for your presentation. My name's Dave Wolf. I have 3 questions in particular about the technology investment that you're making right now. Will the newer equipment address latency concerns? Will there also be more reliable scenario for customers that currently fade, lose connections during rain and snow events? And then third, with consumers now consuming about 450 gigs of data on just a standard broadband connection and soft caps on satellite turning on at about 40 gigs, how are you going to address that scenario as well with the new investments? And I'll be quiet now.
Okay, so I'll cover the first one on the latency. With the geostationary satellite, the latency will exist. We can't. That's a physics issue. So I can't change the laws of physics. So geostationary, no matter how powerful, how aggressive that satellite is, I can't change that timing on the distance. The lower satellites will be something that will solve that, or not solve that, but will greatly reduce the actual latency, because supposed to be 22,000 miles away, we're a few hundred. As it relates to the actual amount of data being used, as I said, consumers can get all sorts of different plans. So there are 40 gig plans. There are plans for 100 gig. There's unlimited plans. So That does tend to, has changed a little bit over time, David. So, we encourage consumers to look at what type of plans. And as I said, I also mentioned that as people are looking to do more streaming, we recommend that they stream a lot of pre-recorded material using that bonus time so it doesn't impact that their plan allocations. As the new satellites come out with more capacity, I'm sure you're going to see different types of programs and plans that will be available to consumers. So, I mean, just like a highway, if everybody gets it full, we're limited to offers what we can. As we expand that highway, speeds can increase, performance can increase, data caps can increase, those type of things. As it relates to rain and snow, with the more powerful satellites, it should improve that. It's one of the challenges you have when you're sending a signal 22,000 miles. In severe weather events, you can sometimes run into interference. It's just, again, that's just part of the nature. With the lower satellites, I don't know where that's going to be. I mean, it's still so early in the beta. We don't know how weather will impact that technology. There's still a lot to be worked out with the lower technology. I think it's going to be a growth. You won't know what issues you have until you actually deploy the system and start using it. It's one of the challenges you have. You say, in theory, this should be happening, but we need to get it on the houses. We need to get it to consumers so they know and that they can experience what's going on with that. Once somebody had asked me earlier too on pricing. So on the Hughes and Viasat systems, we're seeing people can get packages anywhere from $60 to $120, $150 per. SpaceX is saying they're probably going to be their basic plans in the $70, $80 range. But again, it's early, very early in the game, and I was just reading some press material that Elon Musk had said a while back about pricing. So again, if people have questions on pricing on the low Earth, it's still up in the air. On the geostationary satellites, you can actually go on the Hughes or Viasat website, type in your address, and it will tell you what plans are available, what speeds are available at your actual home. So I've been in meetings, we've literally typed people's addresses in and say, oh, hey, you're able to get a 50 meg service and it's going to be $75 a month. So there's a couple different options that are available, and we encourage consumers to look at those, and encourage consumers to shop around and see which provider is going to offer them the best option. What other questions?
Other questions for Steve from the task force?
Okay.
Well, I do have one question. I mean, so as a consumer, and you addressed some of this, Steve. I mean, when you have a satellite set up, like what are some of the major issues you'd run into? Like, what are some of the biggest complaints you hear from customers?
I think the biggest one we've seen is consumers hitting their data caps because they've got 4 kids at home, they're streaming everything, and they have a low data plan. They're like, well, how come I'm like, well, you need to look at your options here. Maybe you need to increase your plan, or like I said, that bonus time. And frankly, a lot of times that discussion on the bonus thing is literally when the customer is calling up, say, hey, what's going on? How come I'm running into this? We like to tell customers, look at what you're using, how you're using things. People that have things on, such as Alexa. If you're running an Alexa, that's an internet-connected device. If it's on 24/7, you're going to be using more bandwidth. Maybe you don't have to have that on. There's other things that people need to look at when they're doing that. But that's probably the biggest challenge. Obviously, the other challenge we can run into is obviously geographic. I mean, it does need a clear view of the sky. So if we are in a heavily wooded area, it may be a little more challenging to find an installation that's on the plains. I'll use my father as an example. He's in a fairly heavily wooded community, very rural New Hampshire, and we had to mount the satellite dish 60 feet away from the house on the beach, but he's able to get his signal. The same as he had to do with his DirecTV signal back in the 90s when we installed that.
Got it. And as far as the low Earth orbit satellites, I mean, when do you see I know that we're still in the early stages, and SpaceX is just launching them. Amazon is doing kind of the same. When do you see that being more more of a mature technology that would be available to folks?
That's a very good question. I think you're probably going to be 2023, 2024, probably is reasonable. I think SpaceX is saying they're going to be able to offer some service next year in certain parts of the country, possibly northern Canada. But again, I'm just reading off what they're saying with press, but I would say middle part of the decade is going to see a much more deployment. A lot of this is, right now SpaceX is launching about 40 to 50 satellites every month. They're going to need 12,000, so I think we're going to have 400 or 500 up there. If you start doing the math, you're probably looking a few years away before you have a full deployment for the country.
Teddy, this is Diane. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
One of the things that's become real evident with the pandemic is the digital divide is not just availability, but it's accessibility and affordability issue.
Yes.
So in looking at what you've indicated, packages start, it looks like at $60. Leo's SpaceX talking about $70. Obviously, the more to go to the unlimited data or faster speed, prices shouldn't go up. Are there any discounted offerings for low income from the satellite sector?
The challenge we have, and Diane's very good question, the challenge we have is that upfront equipment costs, because that's $1,000+ investment out of the gate. So it's a challenge for us to, that $60, $70 plan has to build in over a 2-year period, much like a cell phone. You buy a cell phone, you can pay $100 a month and it includes the cost of the phone. Well, it's amortized over 2 years. That's sort of where we are at this point. So currently we don't have discounted programs for folks, and that's why as we look at different things such as state funding, if states were to come up with and assist with some of the funding to offset that upfront cost for the consumer, obviously then the cost of the actual service would be down. So we've had some discussions in other states about doing things such as that. Nationally, the companies have also talked on the federal level, saying the exact same thing.
Steve, for the other states where you have gotten agreement to provide funding on a per subscriber basis, has any of that focused on the low income subscriber only, or is it everyone?
Well, so no, good question. So this was I'll specifically used the New York example. They identified about 72,000 customers that had no available service whatsoever, and they worked a program with Hughes to connect customers, and it was a $60 package, which would be price capped for a period of 5 years, and then the state funded essentially cost of equipment and subsidy. But if states were looking to, and we've had some preliminary discussions with states on doing things in rural markets for underserved. We've talked to some states too about. We've got one state that was saying, look, if we've got some students that are economically disadvantaged, how could we do this? And they were saying the state would work with the provider and actually be paying the bill. So I think our providers are very creative, and it's just a matter of getting the right people discussing how best to do things. I'm more than happy to broker those discussions with people and then step back, because those at that point become business decisions with the providers in the best way. I also think as you see more capacity starting next year, that you're going to be able to see a lot more creativity out there on what the providers are doing for expanding.
Just a couple of follow-up questions. With the New York example with HughesNet, was that where Hughes was the winning bidder in the New York auction?
I don't know if it was actually an auction. I don't think it was an auction. I can find out exactly. I'm more than happy to forward details of the exact program in New York and how it was structured, so they could share that with you.
Okay, and then the second question was where the another entity pays the bill. So the satellite industry would be open to the supported services model, where the subscriber that has the satellite receiver is the customer, but the bill is paid for by another entity?
That's been discussed. There's also been discussed vouchers. So Colorado discussed a voucher of $600 a year per household, and then they can pick the provider that was going to be able to serve them the best. There's still a couple different models that I've seen bandied about out there. It's, pandemic has everybody working on the fly of the best way to solve this, so I'm not sure there's a one-stop shop. I empathize with you, but I'm more than happy to share with you what other states are doing if that's any help. I sit on a number of different task forces, so I hear a lot of different things.
Okay, and then finally, I would just offer up, if you need some test sites in Minnesota, I have customers asking how they can try out the LEOs. So I can give you an
So
address.
if they want to, that's actually through SpaceX. They can actually go to the SpaceX website and log in and say, I want to be a beta tester.
Okay.
And just one thing on SpaceX too is they have said when they launch service, it will be in northern part of North America. So Minnesota may be a little quicker than Georgia. It's just the way that that's going to deploy. I think that's what they're saying. We'll find out.
Mr. Chair?
On that specifically, go ahead, yes?
Oh, no, go ahead, Teddy, and then I have a couple of questions. This is Mark.
Okay. Yeah, the question I chose SpaceX specifically was from Bernadine here in the chat. She said 16,000 low orbit satellites seems a lot. Is that how many are needed for the coverage in the United States? What about worldwide coverage? What is the international infrastructure for governing so many satellites?
So, good question. So, Bernadine, a very good question. So that 16,000 will actually be circling the Earth. So they would be able to offer service in Africa once fully deployed, the same as they could offer in North America, the same as they could offer in China, because it'd be, once you've got that web, whoever has the antenna, that's those satellites. Some satellite at some point will be in connection with that. So when they're it's not just coverage for the U.S. It's actually a global coverage network. Each country will control, has the ability to control how, can they offer service. So SpaceX will have to sign agreements with specific countries. So China could say, hey, we don't want you offering service. Other countries could not. The regulation currently to launch the satellites has been approved by the FCC, so they're the ones currently monitoring the use of that spectrum. I hope that helps answer the question.
Go ahead, Mark, with your question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Hi, Mr. Hill. Thanks for your presentation today. Couple of questions. I think I'll maybe do them one at a time so you have a chance to know how to answer. When you talked about first generation and then new satellites in 2017 and then these future satellites that are coming on board, tell me about how you migrate people, or do you not? In other words, do you still have customers on first generation satellites with the lower speeds? Are they able to move to the new technology? Does that have a price increase? Is it the same service, is more expensive on the new? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, sure. So there's still a lot of customers on the slower speed. They might not have wanted to get it. To say there really is not a big price difference between the two. What we're seeing though, obviously as people came off of the lower speed system and onto the newer one, what we've done is used that first generation system to provide support to a lot of low bandwidth applications. Now, when I say a low bandwidth application, it could be the liquor store using it for their credit card machine. It could be using some of these applications. They don't need a lot of bandwidth, so there's no need for somebody to upgrade to that. So, there might be a nominal pricing change for the consumer. I literally think it was maybe $10 to upgrade to the, to the first plan, and then obviously as you got other plans. But pardon me. But we've seen a lot of the, I'll use like Denny's. There's a number of Denny's that use it for satellite for inventory management. Those are low bandwidth applications. Just keep the more basic service. It's gonna be fine. No need to upgrade that customer. The high bandwidth applications, absolutely. those customers were contacted, and most of those customers, it was as soon as the satellite was available, people were switching. I mean, it was a pretty quick switch for people. But as far as I recall, nobody was charged additional money for new equipment or anything like that. It was just sign back up, make a 2-year commitment, like a cell phone. We'll upgrade the equipment. You'll upgrade your service.
Sure. And so there's no, in other words, certain areas, everybody has access to whichever technology, whichever satellite they want. Is that correct?
They do, but between Hughes and Viasat, you're pretty much getting 25.3 everywhere. But if you want Viasat in western parts of Minnesota, it may not be the best option. They may be a slower speed than the Hughes product. So I always recommend customers look at both services and see which one's going to give them the best performance. And part of that just has to do with the capacity and available bandwidth in that particular zip code. The way this works is we use what's called a spot beam technology. If you held a flashlight over a piece of paper, you'd see a ring. Okay, in that ring is where we're providing service. So if you're just and those rings sort of interconnect. But if in that particular ring we're at a capacity issue, we may not be able to offer a 50 meg service in that particular market. Sure. However, HughesNet could have service in that market in offering a 25.3 speed. So you really have to look at both different providers out there.
And that was another kind of a follow-up question. I'm having several. I'm sorry for monopolizing this, but you do have areas, in other words, where capacity is a concern at this time.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah. And a follow-up to that, do you know anything about the capacity of low Earth orbit? Is that a much higher capacity, or still limited, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't tell you what their issues are going to be. I think that as it's going to come down to more satellites and also how many ground stations they have and where those ground stations are located, because that satellite still needs to communicate with a place on the ground. So, on top of just launching satellites, we have to build out a very robust ground station. The more of those that are built out, the more capacity you have. And that's the same with Hughes and Viasat are doing the exact same thing.
Sure. Thank you. And one last question, I think. So, the task force is not surprised to hear me talk about download being consumption. And so Dave Wolf talked about consumers using 450 gigs, monthly and large numbers like that. But the upload side of things is what we call productivity. Mm-hmm. So the ability for folks to be productive takes that upload speed. How are the satellite industry addressing that in terms of what upload speeds are available and how people, what your capacity is there?
Sure.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, currently we've got a 3 meg upload speed. I think with the new systems they're talking probably up to 10, and it's just a matter of it takes a lot more. There's a lot more processing getting the signal up to the satellite and through it as opposed to sending it down. So the upward leg is a much more challenging thing with the technology than the downward, and that will probably be the same with the low Earth as it is with the geostationary.
Sure, and so does that, do you see that, does that provide more capacity issues in your mind?
I don't think, again, the next gen satellites are going to have a terabit of, each one will basically have a terabit of capacity, so I think they're going to see a lot of availability up there. But, again, it remains to be seen. They haven't really released exactly how that will work, so once we get that, I'll be able to forward it over. But, it's something that the providers are always working on how to improve that. And when I say a 25.3 speed with the satellite industry, that's sort of our minimum. We've been rated. HughesNet won the FCC award for most accurate performance. So we don't advertise sort of an up to speed. We advertise this is the speed. So again, depending on location and market and how many people are using it at the same time, and all the other things going on, people could see substantially faster speeds with that. And unlike one thing we did worry about was everybody using it once. Are you going to see it, sort of clog up? We did not see that happen during the peak of the pandemic time when everybody was home, you know, and data volume was through the roof. We did not see a slowdown across the board for consumers.
Well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Steve, there's a question from Steve Georgie, and I think it goes back to the maybe the SpaceX piece. What is the cost per household for connectivity, installation and purchase of equipment, or is it a lease arrangement?
Steve, great question. I don't believe they've released that yet. I think Elon Musk was saying it was probably going to be about $1,000 for the equipment. The original discussion was probably a self-install, using just put up this antenna, point it at the sky, and it's a power over Ethernet. So unlike a fixed satellite system where we have to specifically align that satellite, that dish with that particular satellite, with the low Earth orbit, we wouldn't have to do that because they're going to be picked up from all sorts of different locations. So they're saying a consumer install. Having been in this industry a long time, I'm always afraid of consumer installs because you sort of see some novel approaches to how things are done. But we will see. But you're probably looking in that in that $1,000 range for equipment, much like we are with our tech. As it improves, price may very well come down. Right? You could see a much bigger volume of that. But you could also see, rather than have the consumer pay up front, you could very well easily see a lease, some sort of lease agreement. So it's $70 package plus $15 a month for the equipment, and $85 for giving you a full system. And Hughes and Viasat do similar type program.
Okay. Any more questions for Steve Hill? Okay. Well, that was it. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to come present to us. You got a healthy dose of questions there, so definitely a lot of interest here. And we appreciate you taking the time again out of your day to be able to come and present to this task force.
That's great. If anybody needs to reach me, I'm at shill@sbca.org. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions, send packages, what have you. I can send some one-pagers around that give I've got some information on some of these case studies that are actually video testimonials of consumers using it, which might be an interesting read. So I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, and good luck. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. That concludes our first presentation. Let's do this. Let's take a 7-minute break. We'll start back up at 11:10. I see Brent and Ashley are on the